started on our topic here so we can talk about things and then get you guys back to your workday. One more note that I want to bring up is all of our webinars that we've done for the series through NRHA are available on our website as webinar recordings, and our website is www.nrha.org. So if you miss part of this, if you run into a technical problem, or if there's any webinars that you've missed in the past or like that you can't attend in the future, please head to our website, www.nrha.org, and you can watch the recording. That's also where you can register for upcoming webinars, and so it's kind of a one-stop shop for you. So what are we going to be talking about here today? Well, we're going to be talking about the evolving home improvement industry, and we're going to look at changes in the way retailers, wholesalers, and manufacturers interact. And again, for those of you who are just joining, I'm Dan Tronchek. I'm the editor of Hardware Retailing Magazine and the vice president of publishing for the North American Retail Hardware Association. Also on this slide, and I'll have it again at the end here, is my email address, dant@nrha.org. And yes, I do have a Twitter account, @Dan_Trottenchek, and you can certainly send me questions or comments at either one of those, or if you need a copy of the slides or the PowerPoint, please don't hesitate to give me a shout after the presentation's over, and I will help you out with that. Of course, this, like all of our other webinars, is sponsored by NRHA and Hardware Retailing Magazine. And what we'll discuss here today is we're really going to talk about the changing needs of retailers. As the market has changed and as the home improvement industry as a whole has changed, retailers, because they're at the end of the supply chain, have also had changing needs. And of course, as you know, the North American Retail Hardware Association, our main goal is to help retailers who are selling home improvement products to become better and more profitable at what they do. And one of the ways we do that is certainly by facilitating communication between the channel partners. It's really one of the most important things we do. We provide training to retailers, we provide information to retailers and tips on how to run a better business, but what we really do is we kind of sit as an impartial third party in the middle of all these channel partners, and we try and share information backwards and forwards. From the retailer or from the manufacturer and wholesaler side, you have to understand, if you're a retailer, that it's very difficult because you're such a fragmented group, because there are 36,000 independent retailers, it's very difficult for wholesalers and manufacturers to really ask you all questions at the same time and find out what your needs as a group are. Because you are so individual and because you are so independent, it becomes very difficult for a manufacturer or wholesaler to say, what is it that you want? Because your needs and wants might be very different from the guy next to you and the guy next to you and the guy next to him. So as an association, we set out to ask retailers, how are these other channel partners serving you? Are you getting what you need from them? And then also ask, what do you need? Because in a lot of cases, manufacturers or wholesalers might not exactly understand what's important to you as a retailer and what you need on a daily basis support-wise from them. So that's one of the things we're certainly going to talk about today. And we're also going to start out by taking a little glimpse at what's going on in the home improvement market right now and today that may reflect on what are some of the things that you need as a retailer. So how we got here, is this just stuff I made up, or we actually got a basis in something here? And what we did is we set out in 2010, we conducted detailed interviews with more than 450 retailers across all store types. So we talked to hardware stores, home centers, and lumber yards, and really of all sizes. So this wasn't just small stores, it wasn't just big stores, it was stores across all types. And we sent them a survey. It was a very detailed survey asking them about what they want and need from their channel partners. And then we followed up with those with random phone interviews with some of the survey respondents to get a little bit more detailed input about some of the specific responses. So before we dive into those responses and look at that segment of the survey, let's talk a little bit about the home improvement marketplace. And this is just kind of a primer to get us into the greater conversation. Obviously, those of you who are involved in the industry and those of you, whether you're new to the industry or have been around for a while, it's pretty much common knowledge by this point that the home improvement industry had really been riding a crest throughout the 90s and really up until about 2007, where sales continued to go up year after year. Well, as the market fell apart, as housing market began to decline, well, a lot of home improvement sales went along with that. Just really, I mean, it's not unexpected. It's certainly conventional wisdom to understand that as the economy began to soften, so did sales in the home improvement market, possibly more so than in other retail market segments. But we really saw the first big decline in 2008, then 2009 fell down even further, and we really felt as analysts that that was pretty much a low watermark for the industry, because we feel that in 2010, with credit to whatever you want to credit to new homeowner new home buyer tax incentives, or credit to a small rebound in the economy, but sales have begun inching up, and we really expect third and fourth quarter sales for 2010 to be even stronger. So to pull us back, not quite where we were in 2008, but get us about halfway back there, and then to see a continued growth as we go forward to 2011 and 2012. This number really kind of illustrates what we're talking about, is that 2003 to 2009, we saw compound annual growth as an industry of 6.27%. 2008 to 2013, that compound annual growth declined to about 0.89%, which, as you might imagine, is not even keeping pace with inflation. However, if you take out kind of those anomaly years where you really saw the dip and you really look at the rebound, we're going to really return, if you set 2009 as the low water point and go forward, we're going to see about 3.5% growth through 2013 is what we're predicting. Obviously, all of these are predictions. We have pretty sound statistical methods that we look at to make these predictions. However, if everybody was 100% accurate on the predictions, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be laughing on top of a big pile of money. But that's not the case. So these are certainly our best guesses, and we feel they are in line with what other associations and research companies that watch the industry. We're all being what I'd call cautiously optimistic with growth, but we are predicting modest growth to be about on pace with inflation. So it flattens out, but it's certainly better than declines. It's also important to point out when you're looking at the market growth that while the total home improvement retail sales continued to decline in 2008, the hardware store segment was the only segment that saw sales grow. And one of the big reasons for that is that hardware stores, much less so than home centers and certainly lumberyards, aren't quite as closely tied to the home building market and the large big ticket project market. Obviously, hardware stores are more tied to the home repair and maintenance side of things. So you obviously saw people are still having to fix their toilets, still having to fix their kitchen faucets, and taking on smaller projects like painting rooms and projects like that aren't necessarily tied to getting equity out of your house, but it's just really more of disposable income spending. Just real briefly to understand how sales break down in the industry, home centers, which include the big boxes, Home Depot and Lowe's, account for about $179.4 billion in sales. Hardware stores about $37.5 billion, and lumber outlets about $77.6 billion. When you look at total units in the industry, hardware stores are by far the largest number of units. There's just more of them. It's just sales volume through those units, because they're typically less than 10,000 square feet, is not as high as you'd see through the home centers and through the lumberyards with the more big ticket projects. So hardware stores still are dominant in terms of units, and home centers are dominant in terms of sales percentage of overall sales flowing through the industry. What you do see that I like to always point this out because it's something interesting, is that most people assume, who are kind of outside the industry, assume that the big boxes control sales for every department in the industry, from category by category, that big boxes control sales, and that's certainly not true. Big boxes do control sales when you look at the fashion item categories, but when it comes to the core categories, the hardware, the plumbing, the electrical, the independent home improvement retailers still can control a majority of the sales flowing through the channel, and that really bears out when you begin to look at things like Home Depot or Lowe's annual reports, and you see what percentage of their sales come from things like fashion plumbing, fashion electrical, lighting, and appliance sales. That the independent home improvement retailers, the independent home centers, independent hardware stores, independent lumberyards really do control still the majority of sales in the core categories that are flowing through the channel. So let's talk about these surveys we've conducted. Overall, what we discovered was that as a group, retailers are relatively happy with how the wholesaling community is meeting their needs, which is good, and I think it's reflective of the fact that retailers are so closely tied to their wholesalers these days, particularly the independent retailers that really use their wholesalers to help them go to market with whether it's retail programs or presentations or merchandising assortments. They really rely on their wholesalers to help them go to market, and as such, the wholesalers are really really trying to reflect what the retailers want from them, and our research would indicate that they're doing a pretty good job right now. On the manufacturing side, while retailers are pretty well satisfied with what manufacturers are doing, they do identify some pretty clear areas where there's room for improvement. And unfortunately for manufacturers, as you well know, retailers can be a fickle group. And when you ask them what they want, there's a long list of things they want. But when you ask what they're willing to sacrifice one over the other, it becomes a little bit more difficult to pin them down. And I will say, while that can be frustrating, don't forget that the retailers are at the end of the supply chain. And as such, they're that much closer to the consumer. And a lot of retailers' desires are certainly being driven by what the consumer wants. And today's consumer, as we'll look in a couple of slides going forward, is a much more demanding consumer than they were 2, 5, 10 years ago. Retailers are concerned about consolidation, both at the wholesale level and at the manufacturing level, because it is something that is certainly a fact in the industry and continues to occur in the industry, certainly on the manufacturing side and also on the wholesaling side. And retailers become loyal to a brand or become comfortable in a relationship with either a wholesaler or a manufacturer, and then when consolidation occurs, they really have to change their way of going to market, and not only change the way they do business from a business-to-business level, but also have to talk the customers through those kind of transitions, and it's a troubling area for retailers, and certainly a spot of concern going forward. And as I alluded to a few seconds ago, the list of demands retailers have for both wholesalers and manufacturers just continues to grow. And again, that's a direct offshoot of the fact that more pressure is being placed on the retailer from the consumer to deliver more with less. In a separate survey, we asked retailers, distributors, and manufacturers to talk a little bit about what they felt was going to drive the home improvement market going forward. What were the factors taking place out there in the real world that were going to be drivers of sales in the home improvement market? And these are some of the things that rated highest in that survey. They really saw that in the near future, and this is talking about over the next 5 years, that maintenance and repair was going to be the driver for sales in the home improvement industry, and I think that's bearing out. And what's the main reason they responded that way? And again, this is retailers, wholesalers, and manufacturers all in agreement about this, that it's intuitive that as the housing market is slower to come back, as credit is slower to loosen up, that the home repair and maintenance, the fixing the toilets, fixing the faucets is going to continue to be the one thing that is going to continue to drive sales. So really they need to gravitate toward trying to promote their stores and their products to that market. Other things like housing starts and existing home sales and remodeling, they're much less confident that over the next 5 years those are going to be the driver in the industry. What about on the consumer side? We asked these same groups, retailers, wholesalers, and manufacturers, what they felt was going to drive consumer habits. What were going to be the overwhelming consumer concerns that they were going to need to look at and address as they go to market in the future. And one is that they felt DIY activity was going to increase. We also did a separate survey through NRHA, excuse me, and we went out there and we surveyed more than 1,500 consumers across the country about their DIY activities. And in fact, that survey really echoed what we saw here from the sales side, is that consumers were saying they felt their DIY activity was going to increase over the next 2 to 3 years. And it's good because on the retail, manufacturer, wholesale side, they reflect that same thing and feel that consumers are going to increase DIY activity. Consumers are still going to demand price and quality. And the real story throughout all of this is that consumers are increasing demands for service, selection, and information. Consumers want more today. They want it for less, and they expect every retailer to deliver that to them. They expect every product to deliver that to them. And from the wholesale side, they want the products there when they want them and need them. And as DIY activity increases, that's a much greater, more service-intensive customer, so there's even more pressure on retailers to be able to deliver from the customer service front as well as the in-stock front and the product innovation front. These are some of the numbers behind those points we were talking about, broken down by distributors, manufacturers, and retailers. Retailers, certainly when you look at the one thing that was the highest scoring amongst all those predictions, is that retailers felt that consumers will demand greater service in the future. They even outpaced what the manufacturers and distributors felt was going to be happening. So again, all of these things lead to what we were talking about just a second ago, which is more emphasis by the consumer being placed on I want it all, and I want good service, and I want competitive price. On the other side of it, we asked them what, in our long list of things we felt we wanted to ask them about what they felt consumers would be demanding in the future. These were the things that scored the lowest. That consumers would want American-made products, that they would seek lowest price regardless of quality, which is interesting for that point for just 1 second here. While today's consumer is becoming more demanding and is certainly more cautious with the way they spend, that does not mean that they're in the market for inexpensive or cheap items. In fact, what we're beginning to see is a little bit of a shift in the other direction, that consumers are smarter about what they buy, and therefore they're more tight with the money they have, so they're more willing to buy a step-up product that's going to last them a long time and that they're confident is going to perform based on the research they've done prior to the sale. So that's certainly reflected in our opinions from the channel in here, and that was also echoed in the consumer research we did, that it's not about selling cheap products. It's not always about price. It's about value. Another thing that's interesting to point out here is the next response, which was the likelihood of consumers will patronize mass merchants and big boxes more. Before, about 5-6 years ago, even going back as far as 10 years ago, when you asked this question, it was a much higher response rate that the channel partners, distributors, manufacturers, and retailers all felt strongly that consumers would continue to support and patronize these big boxes more and more and more. Well, it's not so much the case today. In fact, it's on the bottom of the results we found in terms of likelihood to occur. So is this part of that buy local movement? Is it part of the fact that there's some big box fatigue? Well, yes, I think it's all of that, but it's certainly what the channel partners are thinking about seeing going forward. So as a result, we see that warehouse home centers' future maybe not as bright in the past. I think you've certainly seen that as you see companies like Home Depot have really kind of hit the saturation point and growth becomes more difficult. Online offerings will increase, and that independents there will continue to be consolidation throughout the market. What we look at here when we're looking at some of those specific statements and looking at the numbers behind them, we asked, what is the likelihood that big boxes will experiment with new store concepts? This year, when we conducted the study, it ranked at 5.5, which is really low on the scale. When we asked the same question about 10 years ago, it was one of the highest returns. So there's been a big shift, and if you remember what was going on about 8-10 years ago when Home Depot was experimenting with formats like the Crossroads Farm Store format or the Villager Hardware small market format, and really a lot of people looked at that as the future wave for big boxes, was experimenting with these alternative formats. Not so much today. I mean, Crossroads did not succeed, Villagers did not succeed, and today the channel partners understand that and say, we don't think the big boxes are going to continue. They really need to focus on the business at hand, which is running big boxes. Pretty strong agreement that big boxes will face mounting financial issues. Not so confident about the fact that big box unit count will grow, and not so confident about the fact that sales at big boxes will grow. Again, this is coming from every segment of the channel, all in agreement about these things. So one thing we wanted to ask was, what percentage of your inventory do you purchase? How do you purchase your inventory? Of the retailers we surveyed. 59% of the inventory is purchased from a co-op national distributor, 22% from a regional distributor, 8% from a specialty distributor, and 12% direct. So we thought that really set the stage, because I think there's, in many ways, a misconception about how independent home improvement retailers get their merchandise. While Most independent retailers certainly rely on a single distributor, be it a co-op or be it a national distributor or be it a regional distributor, for the bulk of their merchandise. That only accounts for about 60% of the merchandise. The other merchandise they source, either, as I showed, either directly through a manufacturer, through a secondary supplier, or through some other relationship they have. But it's still very important to them that the primary distributor and all the distributors that they work with deliver on certain things. So then we went on to ask, how important are the following factors to you as a retailer when it comes to dealing with wholesalers? The top things on that list, as you can see here, were they have to offer prompt and timely delivery. So what our retail respondents said is, first and foremost, you have to be a good distributor. They like the retail programs, and those are important, and you see those further down here. But first and foremost, they need prompt and timely delivery. They have to know that they're going to have the products when they need them to sell. They also need accurate invoices, because not only is it important for them to be able to trust their channel partner and understand that if I get an invoice, I know that I can pay it with confidence, and to not have to go back and spend man hours double checking invoice and constantly having to deal with errors and mistakes. They also want broad selection of categories and easy credits in return, and of course, good customer service. And then things taper off with that. You see down here, they offer me the lowest landed cost is about halfway through the continuum. So obviously cost is important. And I want to stress here that doesn't necessarily mean that cost isn't a very important element for retailers, but really what this reflects more is that it's an expected cost of entry, if you will. A retailer expects the wholesaler they deal with to be able to offer competitive prices. It's the ticket to get into the dance. You have to have that if they're going to do business with you, but you also have to be able to deliver in these other areas. This is a bit difficult chart to see, particularly when you're looking at your computer screen this way. So this is something that, like I said, if you want the slides, I'd be happy to provide to you. But this is more where we asked specifically how good a job are wholesalers doing at meeting your needs. And the dark blue says they're doing a very good job. So if you look across the board, wholesalers are doing a pretty good job across the board. There's really only a couple areas where it sticks out that they can maybe do a little bit better job. But they said, here are the things that are important to us, prompt and timely delivery. And then you look on this, and that is the one area where they feel wholesalers are doing the best job. So they say, we really need this, but we also think our wholesalers are doing a pretty good job of delivering it. So if you're a wholesaler in the audience, congratulations, because you're doing a pretty good job with this. You're also doing a pretty good job with accurate invoices, which we said was important. But again, this is probably for a wholesaler to look at. More important to say, man, we have to deliver these things or we're not going to be able to compete for that business, because these things, as I said about pricing, are the cost of entry. Some areas where there's certainly room to improve. I have a large sales force to serve me. Most of them ranked about average, but there was a pretty good blip for doing a very poor job with that. And I think what that shows is it doesn't necessarily mean you as a wholesaler, you need to have a 200 or 400 man sales force out in the field, but you need to have touch points with your retailers. You can't necessarily just say, I'm going to process your orders and I'm not going to become a part of your business. I'm not going to check in and see how I can help you build your business. They really do want that, and that's an area where you could probably improve as a wholesaler. Another area is offer a variety of niche programs. Everybody's about average, but there's again another blip that says maybe that there's some room for improvement there. Other things like a national advertising program and a rental program, while those are the highest for doing a poor job on the wholesaler's part, those also weren't very high demands when we asked the retailers. Those are all lumped into that other category, and it wasn't a really strong number of retailers that said, I have to have these are very important to me. But again, it was important enough to appear on here that some wholesalers aren't doing a very good job, and obviously not every wholesaler offers a national advertising program, but in terms of rental program, that's another area where retailers feel there is certainly room for improvement. Now, this is a slightly bit of a different take on the question we just talked about. And it was really more asking if you could have one thing, not how important is it to you, but if you had to choose one single most important thing to you, what would it be? And by far, again, I think it's very interesting to see here that by far that a wholesaler offers a broad selection of products was the number one thing. If they can only have one thing, the single most important thing to them, what would it be? And it's a broad selection of products. The second most important thing, and here's where that lowest landed cost comes in, you find with the lowest landed cost, then offer prompt and timely delivery. So, it just reinforces the point that I was making a little bit earlier, that all those other things, when we ask how important are these things to you, well, prompt and timely delivery was the most important thing of all of them, but when you ask them to select one single thing, it goes down a little importance, but a broad selection of products and lowest landed costs really come up in that area. So again, from a retailer's perspective, they're looking for the products they need to appeal to their audience, and they want to be able to buy them through their distributor, not necessarily the primary distributor, but one of the distribution two-step partners that they work with. This is something we asked, again, because it's rather curious to us, is the constant debate that we hear out there on the wholesale side, on the retail side, and on the manufacturing side is 2 or more buying markets a year too much? Now, from a manufacturer's perspective, there's certainly a lot of expense involved with going to at least 2 buying markets a year, because if you're a retailer, you have to understand certainly that a manufacturer is going to go to every buying market that they're involved with, either with a drop ship program or a warehouse program, certainly. So for a manufacturer, they could be going to 20 or 30 markets a year, and that is a significant cost. And so I've heard manufacturers ask of retailers, if we could cut out a buying market and use those costs to offer you different incentives and promotions, is that something you would want to do? We've also heard retailers complain quietly about, I really don't need to go to more than one buying market a year. Well, we asked, what are you currently doing? Right now, 52%, so more than half of the retailers we asked are going to 2 buying markets a year. 33% are going to 1, and 15% are going to 3 or more buying markets a year. But then we asked them, 47% of them said they would be in favor of wholesalers holding just one market, while 53% said they prefer wholesalers to hold 2. Here's a quote from a retailer out of North Dakota. For me, it's not how many markets I go to, it's what I get out of them when I'm there. So obviously it's very important, but you can see how difficult an issue it is. It's kind of like talking about politics these days. Half of the country is for one thing, half of the country is for another, and that's certainly the case with retailers here, is pretty much with a little bit of variation, but half of the number of retailers are in favor of just one buying market, and the other half are in favor of 2. So is it going to change any time in the near future? Based on our research, it certainly doesn't look like it, but it's interesting to at least ask the question, and it sheds a little bit of light on the difficulty that a wholesaler has and a manufacturer has when determining what buying markets to go to and how many to hold, that you're going to upset one half of your population either way. And of course, the retailers always can make the selection. The ones who say they only want one buying market a year can always make the selection to only attend one. Here are some more quotes we got specifically from retailers about how their wholesalers are doing business with them. Keep listing like you have been. It's extremely important right now when so many dealers are fighting the economy. So again, this goes back to what we originally started with, that wholesalers are doing a pretty good job. Wholesalers are listening to retailers, and it seems as if they're responding to what the retailers need. Continue working on staying ahead of the industry trends such as green products and new, highly promoted, highly visible products. So they certainly want their wholesalers to bring new products to them, which I know is a challenge and an often debated topic between manufacturers and wholesalers, with manufacturers trying to get more new products into the channel and wholesalers dealing with the reality of only having a limited amount of warehouse space in which to stock those products. So retailers are looking for new products to differentiate their assortments from the competition. Lastly here, communication. Listen to what we have to say. Realize that when we are doing better, so are they. So again, it's just a plea from the retail channel saying, please continue to listen to us like you have been, because the better we do as retailers, the better you're going to do as wholesalers, because obviously the more we can buy. Let's talk about manufacturers and how retailers perceive their relationships with manufacturers. like on the wholesaler side, we said, how important are the following factors? So this is a wide range. We asked you to rate each one of these on importance. And for manufacturers, you're probably just out there scratching your heads right now because everything is important. On the wholesaler chart, there were 3 or 4 things that really were kind of dominant. On this chart, you have to go down really to the last 2 things on the list to see something that appears to be a little bit different from the rest of the pack. But if you start at the top, first thing they want is products of high quality. And again, that is a direct reflection of the fact that consumers want quality products. I really feel that the age of the knockoff pliers and the cheap import hand tools that are throwaway tools is beginning to go away. That does not mean in any way, shape, or form that there is not a market for that. But what it does mean is consumers who are becoming more concerned about how they spend their dollars are gravitating away from spending money on disposable things. Second most important after quality products is that the products are in the warehouse. They want to be able to buy through two-step because of the ease of accessing those products, have an easy return policy, low order minimums, oh, by the way, lowest landed cost, don't sell the big boxes. So again, guys, on the retailer, if you're a retailer out there, you can look at this and you're probably shaking your head up and down saying, yeah, I do want all those things. But when you see it illustrated this way, at least you can come to appreciate the manufacturer's point of view that, man, you're asking me for a whole lot of things, and on top of that, I've got continued margin pressures, and I've got continued competitive pressures, and the other consolidation issues staring me in the face, and global market realities as far as pricing on commodities and things like that. So it's a pretty tall order for manufacturers, but guess what? It's what retailers want. So manufacturers are stuck having to prioritize and having to figure out what areas that they can be successful in. We asked how well manufacturers are doing. They think you are doing a good job at producing high-quality products. They like the fact that you continue to produce new and innovative lines. Not so hot on the fact that you're giving them the prices they need or supporting the products with ads. Keeping them informed about specials, providing me products to differentiate and provide training. Again, those are all pretty high marks. So retailers are rating manufacturers well in those areas, but there are some areas to improve. Again, they have laid out such a Herculean task to the manufacturers of, we want all these things are important to us, and at least in these areas, they feel you're doing a pretty good job, but there is room for improvement. Like we showed on the wholesaler survey earlier, if you had to select the single most important thing to you, what is the single most important thing, and that it's the product is stocked in warehouse. So while all those other things are important, when it's drilled down to what's the single most important thing about me purchasing your products or about my relationship with you, is that you can get it stocked in my warehouse. Then highest quality and lowest landed costs are really about the same. So if I'm a manufacturer and I look at that large puzzle of things that they want from me, that retailers want from me, I think it may be more important for you to look at this and say, how can I figure out how to distribute my products to them effectively, whether it's through their primary wholesaler or a secondary wholesaler, but I have to offer them a way that's going to allow them to receive my products in a timely way and also in order quantities that they can deal with, and I have to deliver them high-quality products at a reasonable, fair cost. Yeah, I mean, it's back to basic buying and selling. I need to make sure I can get stuff to them first and foremost. I need to deliver a good product and at a fair cost. It's the same exact pressures that are being put on retailers. I want good products. I want a selection of new products. I want them at a fair cost, and I want them when I need them. So while this may seem like a tall order, it's the same realities that retailers are being presented with at the store level. Here are some of the comments we got from retailers about those manufacturer relations. Give us unique items that can't be found in big box stores, not almost identical items. So again, and more manufacturers are doing this, so kudos to the manufacturers who are coming out and doing these things. But the independent retailers, particularly when they want to find some kind of competitive edge, they love the stuff that can allow them to differentiate slightly their assortments. And what they mean by that, again, is what they're saying, not almost identical items. It's not put a red widget in a blue box at one store and a blue widget in a red box at the other store. They really want something that's distinctly different. So they can say, I offer this and the big boxes don't, or yes, you could buy this at the big boxes, but what I'm offering is a super premium product or a super discount product that you're not going to be able to get over there, because today's customer is smart, and they're going to know if they're being fooled, and retailers certainly don't want to be in the position to say, well, yeah, it is pretty much the same thing, but I'm charging a different price. So if you're going to be able to do that as a manufacturer, make sure that it's truly a differentiator when it comes to the product offering. Don't produce a junk new product, because we can only sell it one time. If it's junk, it'll never sell a second time. And I like to talk about this. One retailer specifically actually put this in a little bit different way. Is that and I'll clean up the language for the sake of the webinar audience. But they sell, if I sell a piece of crap once, they'll blame the manufacturer, just say I bought a piece of crap product. If I sell a piece of crap product to someone twice, then all of a sudden I'm the store that sells crap. And again, it goes back to that, in a consumer's mind, if they see a $1.99 tool, they're expecting a certain amount of performance out of that tool, even though it was $1.99. And if they take it home and use it once and it breaks, it's still going to bother them that they paid $1.99 for it. So again, if you take this statement, which is really kind of a representative statement from a bunch of other comments that were made by the retailers we talked to, it goes back to that high-quality thing, that they really want to be able to offer high-quality products, and it's value products. Find more products made in the USA. Customers are always looking to keep people working. And it's kind of interesting, because when we asked as a group in the earlier survey whether Made in USA was something that they saw consumers gravitating more to the future, it was kind of a lukewarm, kind of a tepid response. Not many people said, oh yeah, I really think consumers are going to be looking for products in the USA. Well, that survey was fielded about a year ago, a little bit over a year ago. This more recent survey was fielded earlier this year, and I think you're beginning to see a change. You are beginning to see a change in a demand for Made in America products, and I think it's in response to everything that's going on globally. I think it's in response to the buy local movement. So I think that's something that we are continuing to monitor as an association. In fact, we're doing a research project on just that phenomenon, to find out how much consumer attitudes are changing toward Made in USA. But if you're a manufacturer, it's something to take notice of, that we're beginning to see that there is a change on the retail and at the consumer level for people wanting more Made in USA product. So what are some of the things to take away from what we've talked about here today? Hopefully there are a few things to take away. A lot of manufacturers, again, your heads are probably spinning. Wholesalers may be, straining your shoulders to pat yourselves on the back, but the real things you want to take away is that retailers are under much greater pressure today from consumers when it comes to service, pricing, and selection. You never want to have to be at the either end of the supply chain, and the wholesalers will say you don't necessarily want to be in the middle either, but the retailers really are the front. They're the soldiers on the front lines representing what they're seeing from the consumers, and man, they need these things to compete. Today's consumer wants more. They're more educated about the products. They're more sophisticated when it comes to their retail experiences. They're more knowledgeable about price. They got mobile phone apps that can compare prices from one store to the next. So you have to be sharp with your products, with your pricing, with everything as a retailer if you want to compete. And they need help from the wholesalers and manufacturers to make sure they can be there. Overall, retailers are very pleased with the way wholesalers and manufacturers interact with them, and I think that came through in this too. When we field this kind of study, we never really know. We have a hypothesis, and in the past it hasn't always looked this way. In the past there's been a lot more tension between manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers. Now we think that there's more of a spirit of working together, but that doesn't mean that there's not room for improvement. Which is what it says here. There is need for greater collaboration among channel partners. I think manufacturers today are more willing to listen to and want to hear from independent retailers as to what they want, and I think wholesalers are the same way. We feel that there's an increasing importance of Made in USA products, and lastly, price, selection, and speed to market are all important. So again, it's a tall order for retailers, wholesalers, and manufacturers, but that's why the strong continue to survive and thrive, and the weak ones continue to go away, and it will continue to be that way more so in the future as consumers are more cautious with how they spend and more demanding of what they want. I hope you guys all enjoyed the presentation today. I think we do have a few questions here that I'm going to kind of go through. First question, do you think manufacturers are doing a disservice when they offer customers access to their products direct. I don't want to speak for retailers as a whole here, but certainly if I'm a retailer trying to sell your products for a living to put food on my family's table, and then you come out with infomercials with opportunities for them to buy the product direct, it certainly would rub me the wrong way. However, I have heard the other side of the coin where retailers, if you give them the opportunity to promote those or sell those products through their stores, actually get a rub off of that kind of advertising, whether it be an infomercial or direct through a website. Because what it really boils down to, and this is a conversation that we used to have when the web and internet retailing really kind of became the new news. And the conversation was, back then everybody was scared. All the retailers were scared. Oh, my gosh, we're going to have these websites open up and they're going to put us out of business because people can just order box wrenches from their bedroom. Well, the truth is, people still want to go out and shop. They still want to go to a store where they can. Shopping is an experience, and the retail is an experience. And there are some things that are more convenient to order, perhaps online. But still, when we look today, and we just did ask consumers this question, what they're using the web for, primarily they're using the web for research. And if they can buy a product online, more people are doing that. But still, there's so many people that want to come into a store to shop it. So I think there's no good answer to your question because every retailer is going to have a different opinion. But I think in general, as a manufacturer, it's more about how you go to market with that, how you go to market with the direct sales. There was just a big hubbub over Benjamin Moore selling paint direct from their website, and the retailers were very upset that Benjamin Moore was now selling, really kind of in essence going to competition with them. And so there was a lot of conversation about this, and Benjamin Moore's perspective is that we're helping to promote the brand, and we don't want to sell multiple gallons of paint online. We want to drive people into the stores, but this is a promotion to do that and get people to the stores. And the retailers, we're in many cases upset just with the whole concept. So again, a lot of it just depends on how you go to market with it. So I wish I can give you a better answer, but you ask 50 retailers and you got 50 different opinions about it. What is your opinion about True Value's destination True Value format, the size, merchandise, content, services, and have you seen the TV new company store? What do you feel is the premier co-op and why? Well, it's as I started this conversation at NRHA, we see ourselves as kind of the mediator, the moderator in the middle of this discussion. So we really make it a point not to endorse one program over another. I mean, and that's kind of the pat answer that I need to give from NRHA's perspective. But that being said, I mean, really what I truly believe is that I have seen incredible True Value stores. I've seen incredible Ace stores, incredible Orgill stores, incredible House Hassan stores, and I've seen crappy True Value, Ace, Do It Best stores, all those. And so really what I say to you is, I mean, it's kind of like, telling you what kind of girl you should date. Do you like redheads or do you like brunette? It's really what fits you best. So I really, truly, to my core, hesitate to endorse one store format or one program over another because it's really a matter of what you feel is going to work best in your market, how you feel you're going to best interact with that company. As far as True Value's destination True Value store, I think it's a fantastic store format. It's very nice. It's the use of signage and the way they've kind of changed to a more of a creative sort of visual appeal with the signage and the way they set it up to be kind of a modular thing that you can pick and choose the departments you want. I think it's fantastic. But that being said, I think Ace has some fantastic store programs. I think Do It Best and Orgill have some fantastic store programs. I would not take anything. If you're a True Value retailer and you want to make your store look better, man, destination True Value is a great thing to look at. And again, I just stress that Orgill, Do It Best, House Hassan, all of them have store programs that can help you be better at what you do. But I would stress that you need to really hold those programs up to what your market wants and not be satisfied with just saying, I'm going to take this out of the box and implement it. Really take a close look at what you feel your customers want, get feedback from your customers, get feedback from your employees, and make your decisions going that way. But yeah, True Value's destination, it's a fantastic, it looks great. And they've done great things with it. And if you're a True Value retailer, man, I'd certainly take a look at it. Why don't manufacturers set MAP pricing so that margins are maintained? Well, I don't want to pretend to be able to get into the heads of manufacturers, but a lot of that has to do with just the pricing pressures that are on manufacturers, and particularly the manufacturers that are doing business at the big boxes. They're trying to set a level playing field with MAP pricing, but I understand that it does become difficult. I think if you talk to the manufacturers on an individual basis and tell them, listen, I'm having a hard time maintaining my margins with the pricing that you set, I think a lot of them, at least the more progressive manufacturers, have real good answers for that and ways that you could look at that MAP pricing and figure out how to package things up or use it as leaders to get into your store so that you could still continue to maintain your margins. And one other thing I'd say on the retail side here is that while that is important, what is more important, in my opinion, is that you constantly be vigilant with your store's pricing, that you implement and you maintain an aggressive variable pricing program that's going to make sure that's going to have a greater impact on your ability to maintain margins across the store level. Don't get so caught up with margins on one and two items. I know a lot of those items, particularly the ones that carry MAP pricing, can be big ticket items, but don't lose sight of the fact that if you're giving away margin on those items, make sure you're getting it back on your blind items, and that will have a greater impact on your store's overall profitability than just those ones and twos. I have a question here about how do manufacturers market to independent retailers in the most cost-effective way. And again, you have asked me, these are great questions, guys, because you're putting me in a tough position here. I think there are a lot of ways that you can communicate to independent retailers. Like I said to start with, independent retailers are a fragmented market. There are 36,000 independent retailers out there. So if you're a manufacturer and you say, I got a sales force of 5 people, and I want those 5 people to reach out to the independent segment, man, they're going to be busy being on the road. So I think you have to have a very comprehensive strategy. One element to that strategy, and please forgive me for my blatant pitch here, but is advertising in trade media. Hardware Retailing Magazine reaches each and every one of the 36,000 retailers out there. We have statistics to show that our readers do respond to the ads in the magazine. We have statistics to show how long each reader spends with the magazine. It's an average of about 2 hours. So these magazines are being read. But again, that's not the single solution. That's a great way to get your brand in front of retailers and show the market that you support the independent retail market and maybe introduce new products. But you still need to follow that up with individual contact. You need to have people visiting the stores. You need to be at markets. All of those things. It needs to be a comprehensive plan. And, as far as being cost effective, I think you need to just make sure you target the areas you want to. Have an umbrella plan, which could be an ad in hardware retailing, to introduce your product and keep it in front of people, and then also have the ability to go and visit these retailers individually, whether it's at markets or just knocking on their doors, and also have a good product and have a good presentation put together and have some dating in terms that gets those people introduced to your product and see how well it can sell. Another really good question here, Dan. Your research shows that retailers are looking for new products and innovation, but wholesalers are usually the last ones to take on new products. How can that change? Well, again, I mean, what I hope to foster here, if nothing else, is an appreciation among the channel partners of the pressures that each channel partner faces. It's not an easy, a wholesaler has to, when you look at what retailers want from the wholesalers, they want prompt delivery and they want good prices. So you have to stock the A, B, and C items in your warehouse and understand that the warehouses, like a store, only have so much space. to make sure that they can accommodate all those A, B, and C items, they have to be very selective with adding new items to the mix, because for every foot of warehouse rack space you take up with a new product, 1 foot of an old product has to go away. So how do you convince wholesalers to stock your new products? Well, I'll tell you what. The best way to do it is to build, it's just like advertising these days. Grassroots advertising is becoming the norm for advertising and becoming such a very powerful way to reach consumers. Well, it's the same way for manufacturers. You have to find ways to get your product into retailers' stores. And I'll tell you what, I don't care if that means pick 10 retailers and give them free displays. It means a lot more if you can walk into your Ace buyer's office or your House Hassan buyer or whoever it is and say, listen, we debuted this product in 10 stores. Here are our sales results. Here are the feedback from the retailers on what they liked about the product, how it sold, what they liked about interacting with the company. You're going to get a lot further with that buyer than if you just walk in there with a product and say, hey, do you like it? I think retailers are going to like it. So focus groups with retailers, your willingness to support your new product with an advertising campaign. Also, don't forget that wholesalers aren't necessarily, a lot of manufacturers are under the mistaken understanding that wholesalers and wholesale buyers want to get products in the warehouse. That's absolutely wrong-headed. They don't want to get products in the warehouse. They want to get them out of the warehouse. They want to sell those products. They want the warehouse to get them out as soon as they get them in. So it's only half the battle. If you sit down there and you put together a great pitch with your wholesale buyer and they say, okay, I'm going to add your product, and you don't do anything to move that product once it's in the warehouse, you're going to be bumped during the next line review. So it's much better to sit down with a wholesale buyer and say, here's my feedback. I know you don't carry my product. I've given it away in these 10 markets. Here's the retail results from it. Here's feedback from a focus group of retailers I did. And by the way, I'm supporting this product movement with ads in Hardware Retailing Magazine or in other resources that are going to make retailers aware of the fact that you now stock my product so they can go out and buy it. If you put if you win the battle and get your product in the warehouse shelves and it sits there, you're as good as gone. Another question on how do you get these stores that are independently owned, updating their store sets and keeping up with technology and removing old product. It's not something you can do. I mean, you can talk to retailers, and I know we have retailers on this webinar, and you guys understand how it is. Retailers don't have an infinite amount of funding, and it's not so much. It's not so much a manufacturer or a wholesaler that can get a retailer to do it. What's going to get a retailer to do it is the market. Because if a retailer doesn't update their assortments and doesn't keep them fresh and doesn't look for ways to price better and bring new and innovative products in the market, someone's going to, and that someone is going to put them out of business. And the same is true at the manufacturing level. If you can't figure out how to deliver quality products at a competitive price, someone's going to. And they're going to put you out of business. Same at the wholesale level. You see it time and time again. So I don't know, other than preaching the gospel and other than telling and showing examples of retailers who make these changes and find greater success, I could go on for an hour and a half about retailers who change their stores and then just see the windfall of sales that creates and are just blown away by what the payback is on it. I know the wholesalers will talk about it till they're blue in the face, convincing people to look at things like Destination True Value because they could show them, if you make these changes, how your store and your sales can improve. But the market is ultimately going to be what pushes retailers into making these decisions. What are dealer priorities when they attend a distributor dealer market? What do they hope to accomplish? And that was not part of our research because we weren't really necessarily researching dealer markets, but it's a very good question, and I can give you some anecdotal feedback about that. What I hear retailers saying is that they go to market with a lot of planned purchases. And usually on day one, they try and secure all those planned purchases. They know what they order every year at the fall market. They know what they order every year at the spring market. And so the first day, they really kind of spend trying to knock those purchases out. So the best way to market to those guys is to make sure to remind them, provide them with information about what they bought last year, any new specials you might have around the market, make sure they get that information in advance, and then they usually spend the better part of the next couple days looking for new products. And again, that's all about keeping them informed. It's like anything. Go to any trade show, go to the mall. You have to do something to get those retailers' attention, and you have to do something to show them why your product is the product they should be looking at. And if you don't do that, you're just going to be a face in the crowd. So again, I don't know that that's a real good answer to your question because I don't have any concrete research to back it up. But anecdotally, from talking to hundreds of retailers, that's typically how I hear they shop the markets. We asked, or we got a question here, with the answers we received, what is the big difference between hardware stores and home centers and what they're demanding or asking for from manufacturers and retailers? Typically, home centers, as you might expect, again, it's kind of common logic that they buy a lot more product direct from manufacturers because they have the ability to buy it in bigger bulk quantities. And so from the manufacturers, they're certainly more concerned with the kind of deals they can offer them directly. But really, it was interesting to see that a lot of the other stuff in terms of what they want was really on par with what the hardware stores want. A little bit less concern about things like store programs because, again, most home centers that are around today, and this isn't always the case, but are typically part of at least a small chain with 2 to 3 stores, and so they have the ability to get an economy of scale, and some of the things they typically have a buying staff on hand, whereas a hardware retailer a hardware store relies more heavily on the wholesaler buyer's opinions, whereas a home center typically has at least 1 or 2 buyers on staff that can help make buying decisions and negotiate better deals for us. So there's some differences there, but in terms of what they were demanding as far as speed to market and access to products, it was really about the same. Let's see. I have one last question down here, I think. What are the dealer prices? I think I actually answered this. It was another question on the same topic. What are dealer priorities when they attend a distributor dealer market? They tend to walk the pallet alley and new product sections. What else do they hope to accomplish while the show? I think I answered that. And we're just about on time here, guys. So, man, this was a really good discussion. My mouth's a little dry from talking so much. I hope I didn't bore you too much. But thank you all for attending this. Again, my email address and Twitter account are up there. If you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with me. And I'd encourage you to attend future NRHA webinar sessions. If you missed any portion of this, it's going to be on our website, www.nrha.org, for you to download in its entirety. Thank you guys so much, and have a great day.